What's up, my wizards? It's your boy, Dev, Mtg. We like magic, all that stuff. And we got some Wednesday Dominaria spoilers for you. And actually, today was one of those rare days where we saw like just as many new cards as we saw art for cards from the leaks. So there's a lot to talk about. Let's go ahead and jump into it. Well, first of all, dim new arts. We got to see art for Spore Crown Thallid, Skizik, and In Bolus's Clutches today. First of all, Spore Crown Thallid will matter. As we move through this video, we'll see a couple of cards that work pretty well with him, so keep him in mind. And I should say this before I move on from him. This is one of my favorite arts of the entire day. This is going to look incredible foil, but it looks good enough, even just in its regular cardboard form. This is really good looking art. Skizik's back, looking good, and reprinted at Uncommon, which is pretty cool. I think that this is maybe at least a good budget option if you're looking to replace a Hazoret. It's got that going for it, you know. If you're trying to build a really fast mono red aggro deck, but you don't have a whole lot of money, this is a pretty decent budget replacement, but I don't think it's anything more than that. And In Bolus's Clutches is an expensive and possibly worse confiscate, and the art is goofy to me. I guess the story implications are there, yeah, but Bolus looks as goofy as he's ever looked on any art piece as far as I'm concerned. But there were 3 more cards that we got new art for, and these are a little bit more exciting for my money. We got to see Arielle Knight of Windgrace, Lich's Mastery, and Sylvan Awakening. I think there's a lot of potential on all 3 of these cards. You know, Arielle is a planeswalker on a body. She's got 2 different really good activated abilities that work well against different kinds of decks. You know, against something slow or something control-y, you can make an army of guys as long as you can keep your Arielle out. Against decks with lots of creatures, you can kill their guys, given that you have some knights out. But hey, you know, the first ability feeds into the second ability. So I like a lot about Arielle. I think that, yeah, the usual bad stuff applies. It doesn't do anything the turn it comes out. You have to wait a whole turn to do anything with it. It takes forever for it to actually have, you know, real effect on the board. So I think there's a lot of different problems with the card, but there's a lot of things that made me like it too. Sylvan Awakening is another card with lots of potential. You know, it's been a while since we had a card like this in Standard that was any good, at least. And I think Sylvan Awakening is definitely good looking. You know, if you've got a butt ton of lands out, this can just end the game on the spot for you, and there's plenty of decks that have the ability to put a butt ton of lands out. So I just don't know. You know, maybe there's better options, you know, better in-game options for a ramp deck. There almost certainly are, but I could definitely see a deck that wants to try and make this work. There's actually a card that we'll see a little bit later on that I'm not too high on, but it does, you know, hey, it could at least work pretty well with Awakening. So I could see a couple of different builds with Sylvan Awakening. I just have to be convinced that they're better than, you know, what we're already doing with ramp decks. In Lich's Mastery, save this for last, because I love this card. Now, during the leaks, I actually had a bunch of different comments about this card, people not quite getting it because there's a mountain of text on it. So let's go over this one more time. Lich's Mastery, 6 mana, it's 3 and 3 black. That's a pretty big commitment to black mana. It's a legendary enchantment that has hexproof. Remember that. It's got hexproof. You cannot lose the game. You can't lose it. And whenever you gain life, you draw that many cards. Whenever you lose life, for each 1 life you lost, exile a permanent you control or card from your hand or graveyard. When Mastery leaves the battlefield, that's when you lose the game. I like a lot of what this card does. There's definitely decks we can build around this, and honestly, we don't even have to build around it. I think it slots into a couple of different things right now. You know, a black-white approach deck or an Esper Approach of the Second Sun deck. I think this looks pretty good, and obviously this works really well with Approach of the Second Sun. It gains you a lot of life, draws you a bunch of cards when you do cast your Approach. This looks decent with Approach, and yeah, it's a huge black commitment, but you could probably sneak 1 white mana onto a card or 2 in that deck and be just fine. So I think there's a lot of potential here. I'm really excited to brew with this card. I think we can do a lot with it, and I think it is really, really strong. Once it's out, there's really not a whole lot of answers to it other than running you out of every possible resource. But here we go with some new stuff. I promised you that. I'm going to start with Weight of Memory. I don't really have much to say about this card. It's 5 mana, 3 and 2 blue for a sorcery, draw 3 cards. Target player puts the top 3 cards of their library into their graveyard. Finally, some mill support, right? But the card's bad, obviously. You might play 1 copy of this in your sealed pool. There's a possibility that you will, but honestly, I don't really like the card for too many formats at all. Up next is the Mending of Dominaria! Wait for the Vorthos to finish gasping. It's 5 mana, 3 and 2 green for a saga. When you put the first lore counter and the second lore counter on it, you'll put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. Then you may return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. When it gets that third lore counter, you sacrifice it, of course, and you return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield, and then shuffle your graveyard into your library. Now, I want really badly to like this card, but it's probably just really too slow. But let's go through all the scenarios in which it's decent. First of all, just look at all the stuff that it does. It fuels your graveyard for the first couple of lore counters. It gets you card advantage out of your graveyard for the first couple of lore counters. And then it ramps you if you've got a bunch of lands in your graveyard. And the first two lore counters fuel the ability to put lands in the graveyard. You know, it's likely that you'll get a land or two off of those first couple of lore counters. And then you get a little bit of ramp on turn 7. So that's a little bit late, but you could ramp this into play pretty easily. There's not just Lana Rails, there's a whole bunch of different ways to get this into play a turn early, and then that ramp will come on turn 6, and that might actually be okay. Not to mention, the whole time it's grabbing you cards, you know, it's getting creatures out of your graveyard so that you can then cast them. Once you do, I'll have all of this ramp, and, you know, you might not even need all the ramp. You know, the second turn that's in play, you'll be untapped when you get that lore counter. You can play whatever creature that you got, you know, from your graveyard with it. So, I don't know, there's a lot of cool stuff about the card, definitely, and to boot, it shuffles all of your stuff from your graveyard, other than the lands, obviously, back into your library. So that could also be desirable in lots of situations. Oh, and by the way, mentioned this earlier, this is the thing that could possibly work with Sylvan Awakening. You know, you just put all your lands from your graveyard into play, you spend a few turns in the early game getting them there in the first place. And then, turn 6, again, that's pretty late, but this is probably one of the better enablers for that card that's going to be in the whole format. So I should at least point that out. Otherwise, though, the card is slow. You know, there's probably just better stuff, very likely, that you could be doing for 5 mana in this format, even in this color. So I don't really see it, but there's plenty of weird potential value on this card. Now, I also promised you that I'd show you a couple of cards that work well with Spore Crown. Here they are. Both of them look pretty decent to me. Here's Fungus Field to start off, and Fungus Field's a great name. It's just 2 mana, 1 and a green for an enchantment. 1 green, exile a creature card from your graveyard, create a 1/1 green Saproling token. Sacrifice 2 saplings, draw a card, and gain 2 life. So this is just a much better Night Soil or Necrogenesis. There's been a couple of cards that are like this over the course of Magic, and I've always liked them. You guys have known I've just admitted a few videos ago that I love Fallen Empires. That was a set that I started Magic with. So Thalids I love, and any, you know, call out to Night Soil I freaking love too, because I loved Night Soil. This is actually one of the better cards from Fallen Empires, and they've made it way, way better in this iteration. This is a great tool against, like, multiple decks. I kind of hate that it's going to take up your turn 2, theoretically at least. I think this usually is going to come out on, like, turn 5. You know, you're just not going to spend all your mana on it. There's no reason to play this super early unless you're really trying to get set up, but it's theoretically good against both control as a way to, you know, use all the creatures that they've killed to make more creatures. That's always good. And it's really hard for control to get rid of this, so that's awesome. And it could at least be decent against Stagger to help keep you in the game, you know. Block, sacrifice those 2 guys that are going to die anyway, gain a couple of life. That seems like that would be a decent plan against Aggro too. So I like a lot of what this card can do, and Night Soil has always been able to do stuff like that. Same thing with Necrogenesis. So people that like these kind of cards are probably really happy to see this, and I know I am. Just this card looks great. You know, maybe the Saproling deck could be real. Maybe, possibly, if we keep seeing stuff like this, and the next card I'm going to show you, because both these cards look fantastic. Here it is. Here's Swarm of Spores right here. It's 4 mana, 3 and a green for an instant, most important part about the card, and you create 3 1/1 green Saproling creature tokens. I like this more than Shram's Expertise, to be honest. Like, I know you get a free spell off of Shram's Expertise, but this is way easier to cast. It's more splashable, and it's instant speed. I know I already said it's the most important part about the card. That's kind of all I really should have to say about it, but honestly, do not undervalue the instant speed on this. Being able to cast it at the end of your opponent's turn, or more importantly, during your opponent's combat step, is unbelievable. And you could actually even cast it during your combat step sometimes. I know you're not going to be attacking with them, but there are cards in the format that, like, for instance, Shauna, let's say. This is essentially, during your combat step, a way to give Shauna +3/+3 if you absolutely have to. And that's really, really cool. We also got to see one of my favorite cards of the entire set. This is Yargle, Glutton of Urborg. It's 5 mana, 4 and a black for a 9/3 legendary frog spirit with no text. I guess there is flavor text on it at least, and the flavor text is super metal. I love this flavor text too, and I love the name. Like, where did you come up with the word Yargle? Like, that sounds awful in a way. You know, I had a little bit too much, and I totally yargled out the window of Becky's car on the way home. That's what that sounds like to me. But I love the card. It's a legendary Frog Spirit. The art is freaking awesome. And it's a 9/3 for 5 mana. I think this is a pretty interesting exercise in, like, how low can we cost a creature with 9 power? And, like, what's its toughness got to be, you know? This is probably the huge legendary that Morrow alluded to forever ago. You know, the big vanilla legendary creature. This is probably it. And it's probably also not great at the end of the day, you know? I don't like the 3 toughness. Obviously, you knew I was going to say that. It's bolts, bullets, lightning, strikeable, it's harness, lightningable, it's all the things. It's abradable, it's wizards, lightningable. There's lots of different ways to take out this play for a lot less mana than you spent on it. So I'm just not sure, and yeah, it trades with everything. But that's not necessarily good. You know, it also trades with like 2 and 3 drops sometimes. So I'm not a huge fan of the card's actual constructed playability, but if I rip them in sealed, yeah, I'm going to play all of them. I'm going to play 2 or 3 copies of this if I get them in sealed, because this is just an unbelievable threat. I don't see playing this in standard anytime soon, but again, if you get it in sealed, it's awesome, and it's just one of the best cards in the set, regardless of how good it actually is. But I saved this guy for last. Here's Thran Temporal Gateway right here. It's 4 mana for a legendary artifact. Pay 4 and tap it to put a historic permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield. The reason I saved this one for last is because the most sort of hardcore discussion has been taking place around this card today. You know, there's a lot of different pros and cons to it, and I think that in some ways the pros do outweigh the cons, but I also think that some of the cons that people are presenting for this card aren't necessarily cons at all. I think the pros are pretty obvious. You know, you get a giant discount on whatever you play the next turn if you play this on curve. And there are multiple ways of ramping this out on turn 3 as well. So I could definitely see, you know, the pros. The pros are obvious. People are calling it Timmy bait because the pros are too obvious. But is it a trap? That's where the cons come in. First of all, no, you don't get cast triggers on this. That's the first thing I want to point out. It's not Aetherworks Marvel. A lot of people comparing this to a fixed Aetherworks Marvel. I don't even know that I'd call it that, you know. And I will say that even if it's not Aetherworks Marvel, that it could still be good. Aetherworks Marvel is so annoying and dominated the format so much that it got banned, and a whole lot of people didn't even care. A lot of people were happy about that banning. I'd say like 70% of Magic players, even some people who played Team or Marvel, were fine that Marvel got banned. So even if it's not as good as Aetherworks, I think that's kind of a point in its favor, first of all. But no, you don't get cast triggers. But there's a lot of other cons people are pointing out. One of the big ones is people are saying there's not a whole lot of targets for this card to hit on the next turn. I think that's kind of poppycock, you know. There's Nicol Bolas, that's the most obvious one to me, but there's also things like Zakama. Yeah, again, you don't get the cast trigger, but that's fine. You get this huge, really, really tough to deal with guy, and we've got other creatures like that in Standard at large, plus stuff that's in this set. You know, there's stuff that costs a load of mana in this set that you could play on the next turn with this card and be very happy with. So I think there's actually plenty of targets. But that's where another con comes in. Do you really want to base your whole deck around an artifact, especially one that you have to wait a turn to use? Because Abrade is so prevalent in the format right now. And I have used this argument too, but when you actually look at what's good in Standard right this second, there's Abrades, yes, in many, many main decks, but in just recent tournaments, you know, what was it, the Grand Prix just recently, there were like 2 blue-red God-Fear's Gift decks in the top 4. So people are already basing their decks around artifacts. I think it's Standard Mox, the second place deck, was a blue-white God-Fear's Gift deck. And, yeah, Braid's everywhere, but God-Fear's Gift is still unbelievable. So I don't know if a Braid is everywhere and naturalizes in every sideboard is a good enough argument to keep people off playing an artifact with as much potential upside as this. Another argument I keep hearing is that there's really no good ramp deck in Standard already, so why would we try to build a thing around this? And that's not true either. You know, there's already the Green-Black Masterminds Acquisition deck or the Abzan Masterminds Acquisition deck. Usually you'll see Our Promise, sometimes you'll see Gift of Paradise, both very often. And actually, the newest Magic Online League results. One of the decks at 5-0'd, it's at the very top of the list actually, is Green-Black Ramp. So there are definitely ramp decks in this format right now. I don't think that that's a cogent argument either. But as far as sort of the most damning arguments and the ones that I agree with the most, yeah, this is a huge loss of tempo. You know, you play this on turn 4. There's 100 other things that you could be doing in the format on turn 4, and most of them are better. Chandra's better, Hazoret's better, Phoenix is better. Contempt and Cast Out are probably better than this card, you know. So I'm not sure as far as that end goes. I think this is probably a huge tempo loss on probably the most critical turn in Standard right now. And there's also the argument that it's card disadvantage because it doesn't put you up any cards at all. You know, it just costs you a turn to play it. And it doesn't get you cards. It doesn't dig cards. Like, that was another thing about Aetherworks Marvel, is that it essentially kind of like drew you the card, you know, it digged down a little bit and then got you a card from your library. In this case, you have to have the card in your hand already, which is another way that it's much worse than Marvel. But again, I'm not sure that all of that is enough to keep it from seeing play. There's enough potential upside, especially given that we haven't seen everything in this set yet. Or everything in core set, that at some point in its standard tenure, this could absolutely see play, especially once a braid rotates in 6 months or so. This could absolutely see some amount of play when there's no real, you know, main deckable artifact hate. But a solid spoilers for the Wednesday. I was going to say Tuesday. I'm really stuck in a time warp lately. Just, you know, these previews really put you off your game. Just, what is it, Sunday? No, it's Thursday. What? In any case, there's going to be even more of these tomorrow. So make sure you sub, hit the bell to make sure you actually get notified when I put out new content. Like this video if you like this video. Make sure you go to the comments section, report to me on how you felt about all of these, especially the stuff that I'm sort of on the fence about. Try to convince me one way or the other. All that's important right now, especially before the set comes out. I really want your opinions on these cards. We're a community. Let's get together on these. Are these good or bad? You should also check out my spouse, T-Tag player over there, TCG player. Right there. You can read it. It's right there. It's not actually here with me. I have to edit this in, but it's right there somewhere. But in any case, they're the cheapest place you can pre-order just about anything that I've actually previewed to you so far. And they're a good price guide, too, if you want sort of a good, you know, price check on where we are with these pre-orders. TCG Player is a good place to go. You can peruse their wares at your leisure, or you can go ahead and buy sealed product for like $93 a box. Pretty hot deal. So click the first link in the description. Help them out, which in turn helps me out. Other ways to help me out at somewhat low effort are to follow me on Twitter at SBMTGDev, or to just throw me $1 a month on Patreon.com. You can just like click the link in the description for that. There's a bunch of handy dandy links down there in the description if you're interested. Check those out. But in any case, I'm pretty sure that I'm tapped out for now. That's all I got to say about all these, but that was a lot to say. So hope you enjoyed all this, and I'll catch you cats later. I'm Dev from The Place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind.